sanctions, that they went after individuals, country, and also took some of the Russian assets and said, hey, we're going to give it to the Ukrainian people. When that happened, Bitcoiners came out and they said, you are actually going to further accelerate the demise of the US dollar because now you have introduced this sanctions risk. There was a paper that came out of the Harvard Economics Department where they talked about, will countries now start to buy Bitcoin, not for price, not for the sovereignty, but actually as a sanctions hedge?
Russia.
And so Russia is actually doing that.
Yes.
Do you think they're the only one?
No.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Happy New Year, freaks, and happy Bitcoin Wednesday. It's the first day of 2025. It should shape up to be a massive year for us, and I have a great conversation lined up. Per my last episode, I asked you all if I should include these mainstream news media clips as I have in the past as a time capsule. It seems like the consensus is keep the clips. Don't make them 12-minute sailor clips, which is what I did 2 episodes ago. So keep them on the shorter end and get rid of the music at the end. So that's where we're going so far. If you have any comments or feedback on that path forward, because you guys are a huge part of the show, that's why I come in so often with Dispatch. That's why Dispatch keeps going. Feel free to give me feedback on Nostr or through Fountain Podcast app, which has got Nostr integrated. So if you put it there, I get tagged on Nostr and I can see. So that's awesome. This is obviously Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. I am your host, Odell, and today I am joined by Buck Perley, who focuses on a lot of the open source work that is done over at Unchained Capital. How's it going, Buck?
It's going good. Excited for a new year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Another year in the bucket.
That's
Keep
right.
on pushing. I guess before we get started, I know you mostly as one of the foundational elements of BitDevs Austin. Do you still run BitDevs in Austin?
I co-host. I don't know. It's a group effort to run it. But I've been co-hosting. It's funny. I when I first moved to Austin back in 2018. I just reached out to Justin Moon on Twitter and said like, hey, I'm new here. I don't know anybody. You're a Bitcoiner. Can we get lunch? And so we were chatting. I was telling him some of the stuff I was working on at the time, and he was having trouble just filling out topics during BitDevs. Is like, do you want to just come and talk? Because he didn't want to keep on trying to come up with topics. That was before he did Socratic Seminar, and so I did a couple talks about projects I was working on. And then when we moved to Socratic Seminar, it kind of brought me in to host from time to time. And then Ben Carman kind of joined in as well. And then since then, Justin Moon has kind of like walked off stage a bit into the twilight, I guess. And Carman and I have been mostly Carman. He's the most consistent of us, but yeah.
Yeah, you outlasted Moon. That's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Freaks, as always, the Nostr live chat is at zap.stream/Odell or citadeldispatch.com/stream. All the links for Citadel Dispatch are at citadeldispatch.com. I might remove that live chat if it's not active right now and everyone's nursing off their hangover, but we'll keep it open for a little bit longer. So BitDevs is every month in Austin at Bitcoin Commons. It's modeled off of BitDevs in New York. It's focused on technical developments that happen with a developer focus every month. It's my favorite style of meetup. It's a Socratic meetup. So have you done all 12 months this year? Or did you miss any?
I did miss. I was home for the December one. So this one, I might have missed one other.
So you got like 10 of 12?
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
yeah, 10 or 11, I think I got. Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's a grind. The meetup life is a grind, so that's impressive.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Carmen made
fun.
everyone. Did Carmen make everyone?
No, he broke his like 2 year streak this year.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So Moon is out. Carmen's getting flaky. You're not hitting everyone. I mean, do you have Youngblood that's ready to carry the torch, or?
Um, Vivek has Seared Salmon has been stepping in
Yeah.
a couple times. Has been helping. Ryan Gentry is local and from Lightning Labs. He'll come in from time to time. So yeah, we have subs that we can tag in, and Justin Moon is sometimes often still around. So
he just doesn't want to be at the front of the room. He just wants
Yeah.
to heckle, right?
he literally has done that a couple times. He'll be heckling from the audience. It's like
Yeah. The best place to sit in BitDevs is like the first two rows, so you can heckle, but not be actually the co-host. That's like the ideal situation. Okay, awesome. Yeah, we have BitDevs here in Nashville as well. Ours is run by Steve Myers, Matthew Ramsden, and P. And I think they haven't missed a single one this year. None of the three of them haven't missed a single one. Now, I deserve zero credit. I maybe have been to 2 or 3. This was a very busy year for me. But anyway, enough with BitDevs. I wasn't expecting the BitDevs Inquisition, but it's my favorite thing to do in Austin. Like, if I do go to Austin, I try and plan it around a BitDevs, so I wanted to call it out.
For anyone watching or listening, it's easy to plan because it's always the third Thursday of every month. I think we moved it around once, and was that for TabConf maybe. There's one I think we did it for the first time since Parker had been starting to organize it. So it's easy to plan around, which is kind of a fun aspect of it, that consistency.
Okay, so I pulled out the Zapstream live chat for now. I am watching it on another Screen Freak, so if you comment there, I will bring it back. But until then, you get to see our beautiful mugs in full picture view. I had a feeling that a New Year's rip was kind of aggressive in terms of live chat viewership, but Buck and I did early nights with our families, and we're ready to rock and roll for 2025. So it seemed like a great way to start the year. So Buck, what are we talking about today?
Well, I mean, we can talk about anything. There's always lots to talk about, but yeah, we've just published this morning. In the past week, Unchained has published 2 blog posts, kind of like year in reviews, and one was on the Unchained side, but I thought it would be worthwhile. We kind of had a low-key, very active year on the open source side of Unchained, and so I thought it would be just a nice exercise to. I kind of just started off as a bullet list. I was like, oh, we could actually turn this into a blog post and let people know what's going on. And one reason to do that, to talk about it, is a lot of what we did this year was focused on developer experience, DX, and instead of UX, to make it more inviting, easier to contribute, because I think there's a lot of useful tools that we have there that we basically we write some of our libraries open source that we can also use in our own closed source. And to put that stuff out in the ecosystem when we can. So a lot of work going in this year for that, and kind of just wanted to share it out. And also, incidentally, as a byproduct of that, some new user-facing features that I think some people should be pretty excited about.
Awesome. So, I mean, I'll link the blog post in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, it's already in the description if you want to follow along. So the main focus has been this project called Caravan, this open source project called Caravan. When was it created? I feel like it was created maybe 4 years ago or something like that. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think the first iteration of it came out a year or so before I even joined Unchained. So it's been over 5 years, I think, since the very first version. And it was originally released as just a sovereign recovery tool. Kind of once we came out, especially once we came out with our Vault product. So Unchained started with loans, and then we kind of forked that to have vaults that clients could control the majority of the quorum of keys. And then we wanted to, kind of prove to people that it was safe, such that even if we went away for whatever reason, your funds could still be recovered. And The options for doing that weren't super user-friendly. Typically had to be connected to a full node. Electrum is very difficult for non-technical users, and Unchained is primarily geared to people that care about self-sovereignty, but maybe don't have enough time to be playing around with Electrum and redeem scripts and all of that. So it came out about 5 or 6 years ago as just we call it a stateless coordinator. So not thinking of it as a wallet, because the wallet is it's this ephemeral thing that exists of the relationship between keys. It's not a node. Coordinator is really just an interface for coordinating between the keys that are involved in a wallet, or even just an address. Our first version really was just a single redeem script for recovery.
Yeah, so I mean, when Caravan first came out, I guess the first context is, if for some reason you're not aware, Unchained is a financial services business. Their whole business is based around this idea of collaborative custody. Their Vault product, you hold 2 keys, so you hold basically 2 hardware wallets, and they hold 1 key. If you lose 1 hardware wallet, they will help you spend in that situation, and they basically hold your hand during the whole process. The trade-off being, first of all, it costs money, and then the second being KYC and privacy. And then they have their loan product, and in the loan product, you hold 1 key instead of 2 keys. They hold 1 key, and then an institutional partner holds the 3rd key. So in that situation, the 2 institutions have to come together to liquidate you or steal your money. So you can watch it on chain. You can see it's not rehypothecated. It's just a strictly better situation if you're doing a Bitcoin collateralized loan. And then Caravan came out. And when Caravan came out, it was pre-Sparrow, right? And so this whole idea of, if you're holding 2 of the 3 keys, the reason you're doing it is not only to make sure that Unchained doesn't steal your money, but in a worst case scenario where Unchained goes out of business or something bad happens and Unchained can't service their customers, that you can still spend your money. And that process was a very complicated, convoluted process, which was not good to tell users. So Caravan was created, this open source project that was independent of Unchained, to allow you to easily spend. Now, one of the first ways I ever actually used multi-sig with hardware wallets was with Caravan in the early days, because like I said, it was pre-Sparrow, it was pre-Spectre, and basically the only other option you had was with Electrum. And as Buck mentioned, it is stateless. So if you think about it from a practical sense, the way you're interacting with it is you run Caravan, and then you basically, every time you're adding every hardware wallet. I guess you can save a config file, but you add each hardware wallet, and then it generates your this multi-sig coordinator thing where you can see how much funds you have, create spends, create receives. Okay, so with all that context in, this is interesting. The YouTube chat is actually more active than the Nostr chat right now. Well, that's why we stream everywhere, and YouTube does have 2.5 billion users. So what's new with Caravan? What have you changed? So Caravan felt like the ugly stepchild for a while. It was way ahead of the game, and then kind of everyone stopped using it, and it was just if Unchained goes away, you could just use Sparrow. It wasn't really. It seemed unloved, and I feel like this year that changed. Right, this year it became loved again. So what has changed? What improvements have been made, and how you think about it?
Yeah, and I think the Sparrow piece of it is important. We work closely with Craig. He's added support for our configuration file. We collaborate pretty closely just to make sure things keep working. And I think it's it goes to the ethos of kind of an open source ecosystem where you can have competitors that are not still friendly and work together, right? And so it's really great that our users can go to Sparrow as well and have a better a platform that gets more regular love, like a full-time developer type of thing. And Caravan still serves a different niche, just the fact that it is stateless. You can use mempool.space, again, for people that are our customers, where privacy isn't your top concern. It is really nice to just be able to spin up this, pure JavaScript only thing to interact with your wallet. Nice thing too is that makes it way more portable. So another kind of neat thing that I think is kind of underappreciated is that you can we had to make some changes to our backend in Unchained, but now you can fully interact with your vault, your Unchained vault, without ever logging into Unchained, and everything will continue to work. So you can do that from anywhere with Caravan. So that's pretty neat. And then another piece of it that's important for us is for anything that does have to do we have two primary libraries. One is now called Caravan Wallets, and the other is Caravan Bitcoin. So a lot of anything in our code base, even that we do it Unchained, that is interacting with hardware devices or that is interacting kind of with like the Bitcoin side of stuff, just kind of like client side code, whether you're estimating size and fees or whatever. We do that in our open source code, and then we use that at Unchained. There's lots of benefits for that, whether it's, there's security, just the fresh air, sunlight being the best disinfectant type of thing, open to outside contributors. So there's a lot of reasons to continue showing love to that ecosystem, even outside of now there's alternatives. And this year we there was a few things that I kind of wanted to do. It was pretty clunky to develop on it, especially if you were new to the code base. The code itself had not gotten a lot of love. And so it, like we were saying, is 5 or 6 years old. So there's a lot of kind of older libraries that needed to be updated, older kind of coding practices, no TypeScript, things like that we kind of wanted to just bring into the year 2024. So that was a big focus. One big thing too is to make it more friendly to an open source contributing ecosystem. We kind of rebranded it away from being, an Unchained thing, and instead be Caravan, which is maintained by Unchained, kind of like a Red Hat style model. And there's a lot of advantages to this. I think one is just, people, open source developers, I think, are just going to feel more comfortable contributing something that is its own kind of open source brand, rather than feeling like they're doing free work for a company. And we do want this to be something there are other wallets and coordinators that do use our libraries, and we want to encourage that. And I think that's a good thing. So we want to bring more people in. One of the things that actually kind of spurred this was when Ledger came out with their version 2 app that Salvatore was doing for Ledger to bring in Miniscript and a lot of the major upgrades that he brought over there. He wrote it to be PSBT version 2 to native, you needed to interact with that. And turned out there was no client-side JavaScript libraries that could interact with PSBT version 2. And Casa needed to upgrade to support. We needed to upgrade to support. And there was kind of GIFs and stuff being handed around to add this code, just copy and paste it in. And to me, it just seemed crazy that, it's not the benefits of open source that kind of everybody can benefit from upgrades and things like that. And I also was thinking of course, Casa is not going to contribute to a library that's called Unchained Bitcoin, right? I totally understand that. And I thought it would be better to have some, they still might be hesitant to contribute something that's Caravan, maintained by Unchained, but still I think it makes it a little bit easier. So we wrote this PSBT version 2 library, and I kind of wanted to move things towards this Caravan branding, and that was a big first step. And before moving things over, kind of wanted to make a lot of large architectural decisions as we were migrating. That's the opportunity to make big changes. So that's what a lot of the things that were going on this year from a high level. And then along with that, we were able to get a much more velocity, outside contributors, more features, and yeah, it's been good.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, from you mentioned, I guess, where do we go from here? For a user, a lot of this seems developer focused. From a user perspective, or I guess a client perspective, when do you think people will be? When should they use Sparrow versus when should they use because that's the big thing for me. I use Caravan early days, but now Sparrow is just so good. I don't know. It's hard to, you could even have a Sparrow. A lot of Unchained, I've heard this, a lot of Unchained customers actively have Sparrow just open with their same vaults on Sparrow, so they can watch it there and they can interact with it there.
Yeah, and We are happy to encourage that. Honestly, I kind of think of it as a personal preference thing. And again, Craig he can move a lot faster because it's kind of his full-time project. And so they get more features out. It's certainly more featureful. And a lot of, I think the big advantage with Caravan is the stateless aspect of it. And so, a big reason to use Caravan is if maybe you're away from your node or you don't have a way to SSH into it or whatever it is, it's a good way you can use Caravan. You can still point it to your node if you want to, or if you don't care about, it's pseudo doxing your addresses, you can use it against mempool or the Blockstream backends. So a big part of it, though, is actually like this is a Caravan. The coordinator is kind of a testing ground and a proving ground for some of the underlying code that anybody else can use in their spaces as well. So, one reason to maybe use it or contribute to it is to kind of encourage that ecosystem, whereas the Sparrow ecosystem is a little bit more self-contained, and they push. I think Sparrow does a great job of kind of like pushing the UX ecosystem forward, does a fantastic job in supporting that. I think being able to have tools, and Bitcoin JS lib is a version of this as well. The Caravan libraries now are similar to those. Actually, some of them are wrappers around it that are a little bit more user-friendly for building multi-sig wallets. So otherwise, we love to hear that people are using Sparrow, and I think it's just a great it's a great kind of like case for collaborative custody as the model for the future of Bitcoin custody, in the fact that you collaborate with us, you get a key from us, you can use your wallet wherever you want outside of that, right? And in the future, that's going to open up even more models of collaboration. Right. So this year you had talked about how we have you hold 2 keys and Unchained holds 1 key, but now we have connections where when you can hold a key for your family member, and maybe you don't want to be you don't want your funds to be KYC, but your family member doesn't care about the KYC because they care more about the security. They don't trust themselves as much, but they also don't want to hold 2 keys. Now you can be a part of that. Your funds aren't KYC, but you're helping your friend or family member to manage their funds. You can now interact with that vault as well in Caravan or Sparrow. And anywhere, right? And so I think, or Electrum, right? So I think that aspect of it, to me, is just super cool. So, which one you use is kind of irrelevant. The fact that you can use multiple and be using an Unchained vault is the real magic.
Okay. So, so what I hear is, first of all, it's incredibly lightweight. And by default, it's the whole setup is you don't use your own node for it. So if you're not running a node, but you can use it with your own node, but most people probably don't, and they just hook it up to mempool or Blockstream.
Yeah.
And obviously there's trust involved there from a privacy and a sovereignty perspective. Like you have to trust that they're verifying the blocks and that they're not logging your addresses. I will say that Adam from Blockstream and Wiz from mempool have said that they don't log and aren't tracking that, but you can never verify. The only way you can be sure is if you use your own node. And then the second piece is that it allows you to give back to the ecosystem, and actually there can be competing companies in the collaborative custody space that then borrow some of that code and use some of that code to build their own product suites. And you guys are kind of nurturing that ecosystem, being happy that there are competitors in the collaborative custody space because it's such a strong fundamental of Bitcoin's value prop, this idea that you're not trusting someone else with your money.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like more and more is the case that actually like the way Unchained works, like if you're using Unchained, is kind of built on top of Caravan. Is that what you're insinuating, or is it kind of a parallel thing? You mentioned like some new features have come to Unchained that exist because of the improvements to Caravan. Like what kind of features would that be?
Well, there's definitely shared code. And so anytime we can write code in the open source realm and then bring in, like that's going to be our preference. One example was to get spend to taproot support in this year. It might seem like a trivial thing, but the upgrade process was grueling. It took many months of work to because we had to upgrade from Bitcoin JS Lib version 5 to version 6, which had different dependencies, different build system that we had to build in before we get it to work. Caravan had spent a taproot support first, and then we could upgrade the code in the Unchained platform so that we could support it there too. So that's one example that came in. Another example, it's actually a few kind of new features. Nice thing about Caravan too is Caravan supports more than Unchained does, and that's just because of the nature of if you're hosting your own wallet, we don't it doesn't even have a backend. The backend is your wallet configuration file and the blockchain. That's the database for Caravan, whereas Unchained has a lot more moving pieces. So you can have 7 of 7 wallet if you want. In Caravan, we don't really care about that. But so that said, some other things that we brought into Caravan that we could see come into Unchained or Unchained kind of family of products. One is this was a cool thing that we wanted to add descriptor support. It was something that I was curious about, interested in, and but I didn't want us to build our own descriptor library, basically like a mini script parser. So instead, since BDK is written in Rust, and you can compile Rust to WASM, and you can use WASM in a browser or Node in JavaScript environments, I worked with Steve from the BDK team. We built some WASM bindings that could turn a multi-sig wallet or the JSON that Caravan works in, convert that into a descriptor, and then vice versa as well. Now, on the surface, a multi-sig descriptor is pretty simple. You can just parse it easily if you want with just pure JavaScript. But by using BDK under the hood, first of all, it means that we are using the standard pretty much. BDK, which is written on top of Rust miniscript. It means that that code is pretty well vetted, is used in a lot of wallets. So we don't really have to care about maintaining and bugs or anything like that. And it also means that we're basically supporting miniscript under the hood. Descriptors are basically just, a layer on top of miniscript. So in the future, even if we don't support this in Caravan, that library can, and then you could use that elsewhere. So that was a nice advantage. Now, we don't have descriptors directly yet in Unchained itself. It would be trivial to do. We just want to figure out a good UX for it. It's not a huge amount of demand. But you can convert your Unchained wallet into the descriptors and then import them directly into your Bitcoin node if you want, which is a neat thing. But really, it was about having a playground, a proof of concept. And the other thing that we added this year, and all of the developer experience things that I was talking about earlier allowed us to play around with this, and this I don't think there's any support for in Sparrow, is blinded xpubs. Which is something that Michael Flaxman proposed years ago now. And there haven't really been very many kind of production implementations of this, aside from Flaxman's library, multi-wallet, and then Afshin wrote the SIGBash, I think it was called. Blinded xpubs are pretty simple conceptually, just adding kind of random pass on the end of an existing one. So I first wrote a library that could be imported to any JavaScript project, npm install Caravan BIP32. And then there's tools that will give you the blinded xpub. And then from there, it's pretty easy to just build an interface. I put a lot of, scary warnings, because if you don't keep track of that BIP32 path, or expect to use it with some devices don't support random paths like that, you could be in trouble. But kind of proof of concept in there. And that incidentally came from a project that we are working on internally in Unchained. We don't have it officially on the roadmap anywhere yet, but it is something that we've been interested in for a while, and that would help with kind of KYC concerns.
Okay, so let's do 2 things here. First of all, explain we have a wide variety of listeners of Dispatch, from the technical curious to the more technical. And by the way, no pressure here. Steve Myers is listening. He zapped 2100 sats. Steve Myers is BDK, and also as a callback, he's the guy, one of the 3 guys that runs our BitDevs in Nashville. We also have zaps from Musahi718 and No Good. All 3 of them zapped 2100 sats. I'm going to keep an eye on the Zap stream. If it gets more active, I'll pull it up on screen. So two things. Just descriptors. Why would a user want descriptor support?
It's not the most important thing in the world, but descriptors are a kind of, it's a more transportable way to describe your wallet. So once you have a descriptor, you can, Sparrow already supports the Caravan JSON, but if we had supported descriptors earlier on, Craig wouldn't have had to write that, and you could have just exported the descriptors and exported the descriptors from Caravan and import them directly into Sparrow. And then Bitcoin Core, that's how their wallets are now described, is using descriptors. So you kind of need to, the descriptors are just like that ability to be compatible across anything that's real standard within the ecosystem. And this comes down to the age of Caravan too. Like Caravan was written before PSBT was really widely adopted. It was still kind of just like in the early days. There was no descriptors, were pretty early then as well. So a lot of this stuff, again, like we have our own, company priorities to try and make money and whatever. So we have to shift those things. So this was a lot of it. It seems trivial and like we're just catching up, but I think it's important.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, it makes it much easier to interact with multi-sig wallets from a user perspective, like much more straightforward.
And they have error correcting and stuff as well. Like they have checksums that are built in. They're easier to parse and whatnot. So.
Okay, blinded xpubs. This is something that I've been excited about since Flaxman mentioned it to me at a bar.
Yeah.
Probably like 5 years ago. I don't know when it was like early days of Unchained.
Yeah.
Why would a user care about blinded xpubs? Big picture.
Sure. So let me start explaining how it works, and then I think that helps understand why you would care. So if you think about it, if you go like early days of multisig and why there wasn't anything like even Sparrow before and why Caravan was important, multisig was pretty much something that individuals did on their own with their own keys, and you weren't collaborating as much. So you take your 3 to 5 seeds or whatever, you export xpubs from them, create your wallet, geographically distribute your keys, and you have your wallet, you can get your address, you can deposit, and you're relatively secure. Unchained and places like Casa kind of start introducing this idea of collaborative custody, where you have multiple participants in a quorum, different people that hold different keys. The advantages of that are it distributes risk. You don't have to know where some of the participants keep their keys. You don't have to trust yourself entirely with the security of the wallet, with your funds. So that's really, really important. So in that scenario, rather than you bringing in your devices and exporting xpubs, you get an xpub from every participant, you contribute your own xpubs, and now you have a wallet. And we've been able to do this in Caravan forever. I think Phil from Unchained, he did this famous bet years ago using Caravan between different collaborators to basically put it into an escrow using Caravan, everybody contributing their own keys, and then based off of who won the bet, they signed and
I think I participated in that. I think I got in trouble because I did it drunk. I was trying to show that it's so easy to do that you could do it drunk, and I got a little bit of a lecture from Unchained leadership.
But you were able to do it. It worked great.
Yeah, it was very straightforward. That was the whole point.
That easy. So like that shows the strength and beauty of collaborative custody. Now, however, you still have this kind of problem of privacy because everybody that contributes a key, when you've given an xpub, all of the public keys of yours that will be used in the redeem scripts for all the addresses. So you can get an initial level of privacy where if you don't share the wallet config with one of the participants, that participant can't know the addresses that have been deposited to. However, they can know once those addresses have been spent from. So
because they check the chain data.
The way to fit.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you can look at the chain data and see, because once you spend from a P2SH or P2WSH, the redeem script has to be revealed, and the redeem script has all of the public keys, even the ones that are not signed for. You have to include that because that's the pre-image for the hash in the pay script hash. So in the example, if it's like me, you, and Phil in a bet, and you give me an xpub, and Phil gives me an xpub, and then I create a wallet. And then I start depositing funds to it. You guys don't know the addresses.
And we don't know how much money's in it until you spend from it.
Right. Yeah. But then once you spend, then that privacy starts to get lost. So blinded xpub is the idea of, rather than you just giving me an xpub and then me using that xpub to generate the receive and change addresses and just plug it into Caravan, I can then randomly generate in the proposal, Flaxman suggests 128 bits of entropy. So what that means in BIP32 path terms is basically adding 4 new depths to the HD path. So if you think about, you have an xpub and it's typically, I think, depth 4, and then you just generate your 0 for receive, 0, and then indexes for address, right? What this is, it says before you start generating your addresses, you add 4 more depths. And the reason for that is the only way that you can, what you're doing in the previous example, when you're watching the blockchain, you're basically taking your xpub, generating the standard indexes for your xpub to look up the public keys. But if I'm generating 4 depths of randomness for numbers, basically the sequence numbers in there, you would have to generate, however many addresses for each one of the possible depths with 128 bits of entropy, and then watch the blockchain for any of those possible public keys. That becomes completely infeasible to monitor. So what this means is, now instead of you giving me an xpub and I just using that directly to create a wallet, you give me an xpub, I generate 128 bits of entropy to create a new xpub. That xpub is what's called a blinded xpub, because you don't know that xpub. Only I know that xpub. And the cool thing about BIP32 is that you can generate unhardened paths without private key information. So you give me an xpub and I can generate whatever unhardened public keys from
awesome.
them. And once you've done that, then you don't know the balances. You can't keep track of anything until I ask you to sign. And then I have to give you that blinding information.
Right. So, I mean, the bet example is actually not a great example for this. If you want to think about it from practical terms, first of all, multisig is particularly really great in organizations. Right? In an organization, you don't want just one person in leadership holding the treasury to the Bitcoin, right? And with OpenSats has our entire treasuries in Bitcoin. We keep no balances in bank accounts. Literally, the entire operation of the organization relies on that Bitcoin being secure and being able to be spent from in the future. And so you want multiple people in the organization to have shared control where none of them can spend individually, but they need to come together to spend. It's very, very great for organizations in that particular scenario. But it does mean in the current setup without blinded xpubs that every person in your organization you bring in knows full balance history, knows full transaction history, and sees all the intimate financial details of the organization. Now you can imagine situations where what you really want is you want a couple individuals in the organizations to effectively have what you could think of as like backup keys. If for some reason the main operators die or lose access to funds or something bad happens, you want these backup key operators to come into play, but you don't want them to see the intimate financial details of every transaction and the balance history unless that actually happens. Now, from an individual perspective, you can also imagine a situation where I, a family member, want to help my uncle hold his Bitcoin, but I do not want to know how much Bitcoin he has or when he transacts. But if God forbid something happens to him and I need to help, my aunt recover the funds, I could come into play and I can help recover the funds. And at that point, I'll know balance and transaction history, but that's fine because she needs me to help her recover the money. And so this is a major breakthrough or a major, this has been a major goal for a long time in terms of collaborative custody capability.
Yeah, it's really powerful in those kind of like emergency recovery positions. So the best way I think about it is for like a lawyer who's managing kind of your inheritance scheme, right? Like you don't want your lawyer to have to know the balances that you have, but in case of an emergency, time of your untimely passing or whatever, and your family needs to recover, they can take the blinding factor, those random bits, take it to the lawyer is basically giving you their xpub. You generate a random xpub from that, and then if you need them to recover, then you say, "Hey, like we need help distributing these funds. Can you please sign?" And then if you never need them, then they never need to know your balances. So you kind of opt in. It's like opting into the KYC.
So this is supported in Caravan today.
Yeah. So if you get that xpub from your lawyer, you can paste in that xpub, and then there's a button that says blind the xpub, and then it'll generate, if you trust the code and it's auditable. So if you want to, you can look at it. You can turn off your Wi-Fi so you make sure it's not sent anywhere. And then it'll give you the path, and it'll give you a new xpub, and it'll use that in the new wallet. But it's very important to back that up, because if you don't have that xpub, because it's not a standard, it's just as hard for you to recover it as it is for.
So you're basically you're backing up the config file, which keeps all the data, and that config file.
And you need that path. You need that.
But
path,
the config file is
like
keeping the path, right?
Yes.
But that config file is a privacy risk if it gets leaked. It's not a security risk because you still need the private keys on the hardware wallets.
Right. So I think like using cloud backup for things like this, especially if it's like, some encrypted cloud backup, is perfectly reasonable, because you're not giving up, access to your funds, but it means it's recoverable in case
or redundant USB backup, or and you should side on redundancy and perseverance of the data rather than going like full paranoid, because if it does leak, yes, it sucks because it's a privacy leak, but you don't lose access to your funds. But if you lose it, you lose access to your funds. So you got to keep that in mind. Okay, so go on.
I think about it like there's no difference between somebody stealing your funds and you being unable to recover it. Like your access to your funds is still the same, and so you just got to always keep in mind that complexity is the enemy of security.
Most Bitcoin is lost by mistakes, not by theft. So the dream here, so it's available today in Caravan. I think you're correct that it's not available in Sparrow yet. But if Craig listens to this episode, it might be available in Sparrow soon. The dream has always been that Unchained is the blinded xpub, right? The dream is like you have an organization like Unchained. They hold your hand. They come in a backup scenario, an emergency scenario, or an inheritance scenario. But in the meantime, they don't know. They don't know your addresses or your balances. Is that in the roadmap? Is that ever going to happen? Is that just like a pet unicorn dream?
I'd say it's a pet unicorn dream that is on the roadmap, if I could say that. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can't promise anything, but it is something that's actively being worked on and considered. We recognize there's a lot of different types of Bitcoiners that value the type of service that we provide, even those that are very privacy focused, right? So most recently, I think in the expansion that we added to connections, we were addressing some of that, which is people that are like yourself that are privacy focused, but still have family members that, it's more important for them to have the handholding than to have the privacy. But the ability for you to help them, I think, is super powerful. So just like through, expanding collaborative custody, kind of having more opportunities for Uncle Jim. But then there's we also think that a user like you values the security that our key itself has, but you don't want to KYC yourself. You don't want to onboard into our platform, but the bet is you would still pay for access to our key because of the security that's involved there and the reliability of it. And so giving more people access to that key in these different models is something that we recognize there is some demand for, that there's utility for in the space. And so we definitely want to address that. And like the code that was written into Caravan, the Caravan BIP32 library that was then used in the Caravan coordinator is something that came out of some of this work that we're doing internally to try and explore some.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly it could be very valuable to power users that want some kind of tooling for inheritance, because inheritance is a difficult problem to solve and has to be treated on a case-by-case basis based on your threat model. Yeah, it's mostly an unsolved problem that people have to work very hard on in terms of if they care about freedom and privacy. It's much easier if you're using it in a more handholdy way. I'm kind of curious because I wasn't aware, and maybe you seem more familiar with it. This new like Uncle Jim style collaborative custody model where someone like myself or someone who's listening to the show is holding one key in their family's quorum. That's live on Unchained right now. And how does that work? Like, how does that work in practice? Like, if the user was actually going to do that?
Yeah, so my normal day job is actually like I primarily work on the internal tools and code, and most of my time in Unchained, I've been working on the wallet infrastructure team. So I was actively part of building this tooling out over the past year. And yeah, so the way it works is when you kind of onboard into Unchained, you plug in your devices or pass in your cold card configuration file. And then your keys at a hardened depth are available on the platform. You can now, and you've always kind of been able to do this, but we've been making the infrastructure a lot more robust, share that key with somebody else. Drew, our technical co-founder, he came out with this report not too long ago called the Network of Keys. And the idea is that like the dream of collaborative custody shouldn't just be you come into our platform and you're using our key or you're using partners that we vet, but it's really just like we just want to be another participant. We want to be another option for a participant in your quorum. We think we'll be one of the best participants, but we want people to, really be able to make that choice and have to, we earn that trust type of thing. So if we build the platform in that way, you should be able to choose other people, including what we're calling connections, people that you know yourself. And honestly, the people you're going to trust the most aren't a company even that's, has long track record of trust in this space, but it's going to be your friends and family. We recognize that you should be more trusted to your family than we will be. So we just want to be one of the partners. So yeah, so once your keys are uploaded, those xpubs can be shared and then child derivations generated to create wallets from that. So you don't need to plug in your device every time you're going to create a new wallet with your friends or family. You have that xpub that's already up there, and then we derive child paths from that. And they can create as many vaults as many. We can't use it in loans at the moment, but yeah. And eventually we'll want that to be a model for other companies too. We think that this network of keys should be more than just Unchained and your connections, but companies that kind of like vibe for your business there too.
Okay, so I mean, I could see this being very helpful for like wealth advisors or technically proficient lawyers too.
Yep.
But in
the DAF stuff that was built
the
on
donor
top of
advised
it.
funds.
It's the same
So if you
model.
remember, freaks, I had Phil Geiger on from Unchained a little bit ago about their donor advised funds, which is a way to put Bitcoin towards charitable causes like OpenSats for the future and keep it in Bitcoin in the meantime before you send the funds out. You get immediate tax benefits charitably wise, but you can keep it in Bitcoin. But in practice, so Unchained still has so your usual vaults is 2 of 3. I imagine that isn't changing anytime soon. Usually Unchained holds 1 key, the users holds 2 keys, unless it's an organization which was already set up in a way that you could have like 2 different members of the organization each hold 1 key, and then Unchained holds a key. So does it looks like that, like how it works with organizations, or can you replace the Unchained key? Can you still use the Unchained platform and have 2 family members have a key and you have a key? Okay.
Not yet, but we do want to get to that.
Got it.
You know, kind of like being the platform for collaborative custody as well. And then if you want to purchase eventually, you know, if you want to purchase access to the Unchained key without even being on our platform, you know, that's the blinded xpub side, you can also do that. So really like a lot of
and the blinded xpub side, it's like I'm a power user. I don't even onboard to the platform. You're just giving me the xpub. I'm blinding it. I'm paying you for backup recovery in a worst case scenario situation. That makes sense to me too.
Yeah, and then if you need us to sign, you're basically going to create a PSPT on your own and send us a PSPT and say, please. So
but just currently as it currently stands, the functionality that exists right now in Unchained is I'm onboarding my uncle. By the way, Uncle Jim, when I came up with the term Uncle Jim, I was the uncle. My uncles are actually all pre-coiners. They're not Bitcoiners yet. So I need my siblings to have kids so I can actually become an Uncle Jim. But my uncle, I'm onboarding my uncle. He's finally like, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. And I'm going to do it the right way. He holds a key. I hold a key. Unchained holds a key. And then if he screws something up, as long as I don't lose my key, Unchained still has their key, and we're good to go. Yeah, it's a great model.
And the other, the reverse is also true in the sense where, like, you know, I think about it this way too with my family. If you were managing, first of all, you also don't want to be the technical support for your family.
It's horrible.
I see that as another, it sucks. But Unchained is the best at the business. Like, our frontline teams are as good as it gets for giving that type of support. And a lot of people, even family members, are willing to pay for that. And you're just offering the security now. You're not.
Yeah, you give them the white glove. So they have a question. You're like, just talk to Unchained support.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's an advantage of it is not just if your uncle lost their key, but if something happened to you and that family member is like, crap, like what the hell do I do? They can contact Unchained and they still have 2 keys, right? So this is something I constantly worried about. Like, if I'm managing all of my family's Bitcoin, if something happens to me, I'm still the single point of failure. And you really don't want that. So it gives you peace of mind.
You don't want to get hit by a bus and then have your uncle lose his key. Have his uncle lose his Bitcoin. Okay, that makes sense. This is all awesome. I love this direction that you guys are going in. So what else are we covering here? I see Summer of Bitcoin in the blog post. Where does Summer of Bitcoin, where are they involved?
Yeah, so, I mean, a common thread through the whole blog post was just kind of, you know, wanting to make our open source code more open source ecosystem friendly, easier to build on, more inviting for outside contributors. And the Summer of Bitcoin program kind of fit into that. I think as I was getting more active in that library, and Summer of Bitcoin was kind of shopping around for projects that they could pair with. I guess I should preface, just for people who don't know, Summer of Bitcoin. It's this program that's been running for a few years now. I think they started out just in India, but now they're all over, taking technically minded high school and college students. So a lot of, CS majors and whatnot, that are interested in Bitcoin, but might not have a technical Bitcoin course at their school. They basically do like a boot camp style, ramping up on Bitcoin fundamentals, technical fundamentals, understand how that works. They have a vetting program. They have some tests to evaluate their skills, and then they reach out to open source projects that would be open to taking contributors. So I was reached out to. And they asked for project proposals. So I put up a few, and we had some really great contributions. And I think the point, while, maybe a lot of the people that are listening to this, read the blog post, aren't developers or don't really care about a lot of this sort of stuff. I think the key takeaway is you have to do a lot of kind of like foundational work, especially in open source, to create something that can thrive, get other contributors that bring more user-facing features. And we kind of got some of that out of the Summer of Bitcoin. So we had we had one design intern and then 2 technical interns that were working on projects that landed code that are now available in Caravan for anybody to use. We don't have user-facing aspects of that yet, but it's being worked on, and other people can use it too. So one was a library that we call Caravan Health, and it's basically this intern did a lot of kind of prerequisite work of just researching like statistical analysis of what would contribute to a wallet's health, like if we were going to talk about health metrics. And the interesting thing there too is that there's we kind of narrowed it down to 2 elements of health. One is fee health long-term, and the other is privacy. And the really interesting about that for a wallet is oftentimes those 2 things are in conflict. If you want really good privacy, you're going to have really bad fee health. And if you want really good fee health, by consolidating UTXOs and whatnot, you're going to have very bad privacy. And so all of the work during the summer went into building out these models and then writing out the code that could take in transaction history, UTXO set for a wallet, or analyzing a specific transaction to give you a rating about the health of that wallet. It's a big project to then turn that into a dashboard, but this is the advantage of how we're building out Caravan now, though, is you have an individual library that anybody can use, ingest that code, and build out their own dashboard, including in the Caravan coordinator itself. And I think, when we have something like this, it would be something relatively new. I should also just say, like, a lot of credit for this type of work goes to Merch, who did, from the Bitcoin Core contributor, has been at Chaincode Labs, and I forget where he's moved to now, but he did a coin selection research for his dissertation, and then built in new code for this in Bitcoin Core. And so we take some of that work into account in terms of the waste metrics, which kind of analyzes the UTXO size that people have. So so we still have all this code that we want to kind of like build dashboards out of D3 maps or D3JS to build out actually like this, the mempool space type of visualizations. And then the second project was really exciting is another library. Again, you can use in any code base that you want, but we're also working on building a UX for it within the Caravan coordinator, is Caravan fees. And the idea for this is fee bumping utilities. And so we haven't had RBF in Caravan, again, another way in which Sparrow is pretty far ahead. But we wanted to build out both RBF tools as well as CPFP. I think that is also there's not a lot of really good tooling for that in the space, and it can still be a beneficial way to fee bump. Obviously, there's a lot more attention in this in general around like all the package relay work and ephemeral anchors and all this sort of stuff. And I think the code that was written by this summer Bitcoin intern could be easily leveraged into that. And the way that he wrote the code, I think, is really nice, really modular in a way that it's basically you put in a transaction and then you can set this function to tell you, okay, which is the most economical fee bump strategy, whether it's CPFP or RBF. But for those who don't know, CPFP is child pays for parent. So you basically have a child transaction that fee bumps a parent transaction that got stuck in the mempool. And then based off of that, you can then say, okay, take this transaction and build an RBF transaction that accelerates it, or build the child transaction that will spend one of the outputs to fee bump it based off of this target fee. And then it'll just spit out a PSBT that you can then take and drop it in anywhere, whether it's in your own UX or put it somewhere else. I think that's really neat. And it includes code also for cancellation. So a lot of people think about RBF as just an accelerating feature, but you can also use RBF to cancel a transaction that just sends back to yourself if it's been stuck in the mempool and you no longer want to send it. And RBF supports that too. So all that code is there. It works in theory, and we're going to be starting to build out tooling in the next couple months. So the intern, another cool thing about this program is it creates kind of long-term Bitcoin developers. So there's other projects, people, I think BDK even,
yes.
Steve is still in the chat, he can confirm. Yeah, they have a summer Bitcoin intern that turned into a full-time developer. The guy who's writing the Caravan fees package is continuing to contribute, which has been just really cool to see. Just like, very young, new developers that are just super hungry, contributing to the space, which I appreciate as well, because like the open source stuff and Unchained, it's more of a passion. It's not like the priority, but I want us to keep on moving it forward. So it's really gratifying to have other people that kind of like share in that.
Yeah, I mean, Summer of Bitcoin is awesome. Is an awesome project. There's so much demand for Summer of Bitcoin and not enough internships that they're often oversubscribed at this point by a lot. It's like 95% oversubscribed, maybe even higher. We actually had a Vanderbilt student named Will, who always hangs out around Bitcoin Park, who got into Summer of Bitcoin, and it was a really great experience for him. And now he's going into Bitcoin development in a big way. It was pretty cool because we when we first met him, he was, leadership at his blockchain club at Vanderbilt, and he was like a fresh-eyed, crypto-curious guy, and now he's laser focused on Bitcoin development, and specifically Bitcoin development, not the many shitcoins out there. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. I'm pretty excited about all those developments. The fee health, privacy health is really cool. And just to put a little context out there for the listeners who might not be aware of the trade-off of the back and forth, when you do an on-chain Bitcoin transaction, it's not, your fee is not based on the amount of money you're sending. It's based on the actual size in terms of data that is going to be on chain. And so what happens there is the biggest contributor to that is how many inputs you have in a transaction. So when you might see a wallet and you're like, oh, this wallet says I have 10 million sats in it, it doesn't actually, the wallet doesn't have a set amount. There's a bunch of, you can think of it like bills in your wallet. There's a bunch of UTXOs that add up to that. And if you have a bunch of small ones in there and they're all being combined to send a larger amount, you will pay a higher fee. The lowest fee burden you will possibly pay is if everything's in a single UTXO. And that's obviously horrible for privacy because you've consolidated all of your UTXOs in there. So there's always been this back and forth between automatic UTXO selection, whether or not it should prioritize fees or should prioritize privacy. And really, I think what has become obvious for a lot of people is you have to give users very intuitive controls so that they can kind of make the decision as best as possible. And so this idea of like a fee health, privacy health dashboard or visualization, it seems to me like the holy grail. That would be awesome to see. And just for some context, by the way, freaks, there's a lot of people saying that like we need to rush quote unquote scaling solutions to Bitcoin and whatnot. Coinmetrics did math for this year. Bitcoin sent $6.6 trillion worth of Bitcoin on chain this year. Bitcoiners have sent. And meanwhile, if you look at our live mempool dashboard, you can get into the next block at 4 sats per byte. So it's pretty amazing how much value the Bitcoin network continues to clear. I think people aren't going to start thinking about these fee things unless we start to see more. It is scarce, block space is scarce, and as we start to see more demand on the demand side, and fees hit a more sustained high fee type of environment, then this becomes way more important to people. But the problem is if you're not thinking about fee health ahead of time, you could get into a really bad situation. I remember in 2017, there was a lot of congestion and a lot of Bitcoin chain usage. A lot of people think it was spam related, but Coinbase, for instance, had a bunch of small inputs, and there was rumors that were circulating that fees ended up going down. But if fees hadn't gone down, that they would be in a situation where all these UTXOs were prohibitively expensive to spend, where you can imagine a situation where they think they have $7 billion, but it costs them $4 billion to send the $7 billion, and then all of a sudden you have a really bad situation. So that's the context there. RBF versus child pays for parent. You can think of RBF kind of like you're replacing the original transaction, and child pays for parent. The outputs from the original transaction, you're spending those with a higher fee, so then all of the transactions together. So the cool thing about child pays for parent is you could be on the receiving end of a transaction and you can increase your fees. With RBF, you have to be on the sender side. And And I do think that's interesting that you mentioned the cancel aspect. That's been kind of controversial calling it cancel, but I think it's very intuitive to users, particularly in a high fee environment. Blue Wallet most famously added a big cancel button that effectively is just an RBF to yourself, which people go back and forth on. But I think that makes sense for users who have a transaction stuck and they just want it back in their wallet. Buck,
Yeah.
what else haven't we covered that you're excited about? Is there anything else?
I mean, I'm trying to think. Still on the summer Bitcoin thing. I think it's interesting that you say that now there is scarcity of projects, and I will say, like, it's a lot of work. To basically, you're adding more people that you're managing, and they are young developers, so you really have to be careful. You already have to give an extra amount of scrutiny to open source code because this is code that anybody can see and judge you on. And so it's a reflection of our whole project, anything that goes in. So there's a lot of work on that side. There's a lot of work on the, just kind of like guiding them, what you're expecting. But, one aspect of making Caravan easier to contribute to, and then also for Summer Bitcoin in particular, I guess, is it's selfishly, it's also like a pipeline for hiring. So anybody that's out there that's listening, that's a developer or wants to be a developer, finding open source projects to contribute to, just to learn about, we try and tag issues as like good first problem. Like I got started in Bitcoin development by just answering issues that people had in the Bitcoin project, which is a JavaScript implementation of Bitcoin. And it was such an approachable library. It was so well written, cleanly written, that I could learn a lot about how Bitcoin worked, whereas the C++ Bitcoin core was just far more intimidating and harder to understand. So people that are interested in it, I encourage you, come over to the Caravan repo, find a problem that you want to fix, test things out, even just small stuff like continuing to help with the refactors and adding TypeScript. You'll learn a lot. If there's a feature that you wish Caravan supported and doesn't, add it in, put up a PR, and we'll test it out, and eventually get it in, which I think is a great aspect of open source. It's a big goal that I had in terms of the work that we did this year. And for people, if you don't get into the Summer Bitcoin program for whatever reason, or your proposal, because you also you submit a proposal to the teams and then you get accepted. So I had to reject some people that wanted to work on Caravan stuff because time is the scarcest resource. So
Yep.
But if you still want to contribute, put up PRs, and if they're valuable, if they're helpful, people, we will look at them. So I highly recommend getting into that.
Awesome. I just want to do a quick shout out to the freaks who did join us in the live chat and supported the show via Zaps. As always, Citadel Dispatch is free of advertising and is funded purely from Bitcoin donations from our audience. You can support basically two ways. If you're in the live chat, you can support with Zaps, or you could support through podcasting 2.0 apps like Fountain Podcasts. The top three supporters of the last episode was Lincoln with 10,000 sats, 8 Mithrandir with 7,777 sats, and Sean with 5,000 sats. Thank you for your support, and thank you for all the comments that you leave on Fountain. Like I said, it is Nostr enabled. It looks like Mav21 just came in and zapped 10,000 sats. Happy New Year. Thank you, Mav. What else? Citadel Dispatch. I don't know when the next one's going to be. Rabbit Hole recaps tomorrow. So this week was Money Matters, Dispatch, New Year's Eve, Dispatch, Rabbit Hole recap. But there should be one next week. I think there'll be one next week. You can follow me at primal.net/Odell. I'll keep you guys updated. Or you can subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on your podcast app, and you'll get notified that way. Buck, thank you for joining us. You have any final thoughts?
I don't know. Stay humble. Stay curious. I think we need more curiosity in the Bitcoin space. I think that's an important thing. That's the last thing I'd say, I guess.
I love it. Thank you, Buck, for all your contributions. And maybe, some of these things will get added to Caravan and get added to Unchained, and we'll follow up before the end of the year. It'll be a big year. That'd be awesome.
I think so, yeah. We're going to keep building on top of this momentum for sure.
I will link Bucks and Pub in the show notes. I see someone asking. Make sure you give him lots of love on Noster so he uses it more. Huge shout out to Buck. Huge shout out to the freaks. Love you all. Stay humble, stack sats. Peace.
Thanks.